mind.
Good evening and welcome. My name is Mark Kleinans. I'm superintendent, and this is Paul Terrio from Plant Moran Cressa. We are here tonight to put on a walkthrough so you can see some of the issues that were identified as we began planning for this bond issue. But before we get into the tour, I want to do some quick introductions. We have 3 board members here, I believe. Mike Smith, board president. We have Lisa McKeag, raise your hand. Trustee Ron Cook, where did Ron go? He's right here. Raise your hand. We also have some administrators. We have Sharon Ramirez, our CFO, in the back. She's the one that controls all the money. We have Sandy Crane right here in front. She's marketing. We have Paul Ramirez, grounds. We have Mike, who takes care of Mike Hardy, our food service. We have Heather Johnson. She is an assistant principal. We have Roderick. Roderick, raise your hand. Hurley, he is the principal here. Most of you know Roderick. And we have Kim Alschlager. Kim, raise your hand. And then we have some teachers here. If you're a teacher, stand up from the building. I know we have a couple of them. Thank you, teachers, for coming. And thank you for your service to our kids. Very good. Did I miss anybody? We have Robin Seymour, transportation. Raise your hand, Robin. There you go. I think I've gotten everybody. Very good. Is that everybody? Okay, good. Again, I thank you for being here. This is our third walkthrough that we have completed. The first one, I did about a 45-minute PowerPoint presentation. And after that, the next day, I found out that the 45-minute PowerPoint presentation wasn't really what everyone had in mind. And so many of the folks that came to the community event, it was a redo of that PowerPoint. So as a result, the last meeting, we didn't do that. We jumped right into the tour, and I believe that's what we're going to do tonight. And so, but I do want to encourage you to do a couple of things. Number one, when you came in on the table that Mike's at, there are some handouts. There's a brochure. There's a sheet of paper that has a list of the items that are per building, and then we have a little list identifying the upcoming meetings. Our next walkthrough is at the high school next Tuesday. Then the following Tuesday is MRE, and then on that sheet, it's not on there yet, but we did add one more, and that is the Smith Road walkthrough, and that came as a result of a discussion after our last meeting. So the next 3 Tuesday nights will be busy, and I would certainly invite you to attend one of the walkthroughs. I am so glad that you folks are here. It's interesting when I talk to people about these events, they say that, well, yeah, you can put the walkthroughs on and you can do that, but usually only 20 people show up. Well, look at this crowd here tonight. Certainly at our last meeting we had over 50, so that really tells me that you folks are engaged and care about what happens to Bedford Public as I do. So again, I thank you. The middle school is a big part of this bond project. It's about, what did you estimate, how many?
About 11 million, or 15% or so?
About 15%, $11 million of the $70 million bond issue. If you pull out the brochure and you look, you can see the plans for the bond project, and you can see the plans in terms of what we're going to do with Smith Road, how we're going to handle Jackman, what we're going to do at MRE, and certainly the projects here as well as the high school projects. A big piece of this is a classroom addition for this building. And Paul, when we get on the tour, will speak to that. But there also are many other facets of this. Going green, safe schools, safe entryways going green with new lighting, heating, cooling, all of those types of things. And Paul will explain that as we kind of get rolling into this. So with that, I would also invite you to go to our webpage. Sandy's done a remarkable job. So has Lisa. Spent a ton of time putting our webpage together. On that webpage, the brochure's on there. There actually is the very first walkthrough that was done by Plant Moran Cressa, the facility study. And then also on there is what's called the preliminary qualification application. That is the application that has a list of every project and every dollar amount for that project, also completed by Plant Moran. That was scrutinized big time by the state of Michigan. As a matter of fact, they had to approve the entire project so that we could get their credit rating and move forward. So that is on there as well. We also have our frequently asked questions are on there, and then these folks, I believe there's links to the YouTube of the other walkthroughs. So
go to YouTube and put in Keep Bedford Strong. We have a channel on there so you can see all the meetings from the different schools.
So you could catch that. So we are trying to be very transparent in this process. We're trying to give out as much information as we can. There's actually two committees. One is a general information committee. Okay, in that committee, we are bound, I am bound, going through this process to educate the community on the merits of this and the importance of this for our students. There's also a committee that meets on Monday nights, and they are the Vote Yes Committee. Their job, they're not affiliated with the school. This is on their time. Their job is to promote the message of why they believe that it is important. And I know that Lisa is part of that committee, very active. She's the co-chair. Don Blaze is the other co-chair. I don't think, did Don slip in? I know he was here at the last meeting. But I know that those folks are always looking for help. So if you're interested in getting involved, you could get a hold of Lisa and she'll put you to work. So she's good at that. But with that being said, we understand that this is a pretty significant bond project. The plan was to do a facility study to guide us through a renewal of our sinking fund. And through that process, we found out that the deficits of the district were greater than what a sinking fund would take care of. Hence the reason of why we are at where we're at today. The other important thing is to understand that when the project came together, what we tried to be cognizant of, we know that this is an increase, but we tried to be cognizant of the average homeowner. The average home is about $175,000 in this district. This would amount to an increase of approximately $15. So we tried to size it in a way that we felt was doable. Certainly, it touches every student. If you look at the bond handout, the brochure, you'll see probably not a student that's not touched by this. It's about a 3 to 4 year construction process. Everything has to be done in open, all the bids, all the, just the whole process. And that's why we're trying to be very transparent. That's why we're doing the walkthroughs. That's why we're putting all the information online, and it's really the right way to go. And the board has been very adamant about that. They want to be straightforward with the community, let the community know. To the point where you can look at, for example, the 4-classroom addition, you can go to the preliminary qualification application, click on it, and you can see the dollars that are assigned to that project. So that's how specific we want to be. So I'm very excited. I think that this is a huge step for this community. We have great schools. It's evident. Every week I hear of something that has happened, something that one of our students have done. Our robotics competition going all the way up to Escanaba and winning that event, qualifying for the states and moving on. And we had one of our students here, Roderick, was telling me that Hunter was here, and they a TV station out of Detroit did a huge article about how he has been so helpful with his younger brother who has some challenges. It's just a wonderful school district. If you look at our MEEP scores, tops in the state. That's why I came here. Truly, that's why I came here. This is a great school. It's a reflection of the parents, right? Great schools, good kids equal good parents. And so I'm proud to be here. We're going to do this walkthrough. I could talk forever, but that isn't why you guys came. We're going to do this walkthrough, and then if there are any questions about the JRE walkthrough, we can come back here and hopefully try to answer them. So I do thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Paul, and then we're going to get ready to roll. So, okay?
Great. Thanks for that introduction. So as Mark mentioned, I'm Paul with Plant Moran Cressa, and tonight really is about transparency. So we really wanted to meet with as much of the community as we could and kind of show you the process we went through to put the bond application together. So we didn't just sit back and come up with ideas and shoot from the hip. We actually came out into the district, We met with the building principals, walked the buildings room by room, walked the sites, walked the roofs. We actually met with all the board members one-on-one. We met with administration, the athletic director, the food service director, the maintenance department. So we really tried, the technology director, so we really tried to get as much information as we could so that we could come up with a thorough assessment of the district. And as Mark mentioned, when we were originally engaged, it was to do an assessment of the district to plan the sinking fund. But as we started to put the dollars together, it was pretty apparent that a sinking fund wasn't going to address all the issues that we found. So tonight what we're going to do is just kind of walk through the building, probably starting with this room, I guess, kind of show you some of the things that we saw, and then hopefully if you guys have any questions as we go, you can ask them along the way. So I guess to go ahead and get started, so we're in the media center here. Obviously, this building was built in 1970, so about 44 years ago or so. And you can see, obviously, a lot of the finishes are original. A lot of the mechanical and electrical systems are original to the building. Those present some challenges, as you'll see. So I guess just looking at this room, you can see, obviously, when this media center was put in, I don't think the computer lab was at the top of anyone's mind back in the early 70s. So obviously, there's been a lab put in to the middle of the space, which kind of is what it is. You can see some of the original lighting that's in here, some of the original mechanical equipment that's hanging down. One of the big things that we noticed at all the buildings is obviously the mechanical codes and electrical codes have changed a lot in the last 40 years. So what the systems did back then as opposed to what they need to do now as far as bringing in fresh air, the heating, the cooling. One of the big things with the bond is we're looking at air conditioning all the buildings. Which if you've ever been up on the second floor of this building, whether it's summer or winter, you'll know that it's pretty hot up there. So that's a pretty big piece of the bond as well. Another thing I should mention is, we were not out here to judge, past decisions by the board, the maintenance of the buildings, the upkeep of the buildings. I think you guys have done great with what you had. I think it's just really apparent that it's time for an investment or a reinvestment in the district. So, so as we're walking around here in a minute, you'll kind of see some of those things. You'll see some of the windows with single pane glass that are not very energy efficient. You'll see some of the original mechanical electrical systems, some of the doors and hardware, broken glass, clocks, things of that nature. So I guess we could probably all head out. I think we're going to go down to the main entrance first and kind of talk about the security of the building to get us started. So.
Good. One other introduction that I wanted to take care of is a gentleman that's really behind the one-to-one initiative here. He's our Assistant Superintendent of Instruction and Student Support Services, Mr. Manuzak. Raise your hand. He was doing the one-to-one and now zipped in. So, Mr. Manuzak, welcome. All right, we wanted to just take a few minutes after the tour. If you have any specific questions about the walkthrough or something that you saw or something maybe about the bond project, this would be a time that we could discuss those. I can't guarantee that I can answer every question, but if I can't, I can get your name and number and get a response back to you. Paul will assist with this process. So are there any questions that anybody that you have about the walkthrough, first of all? Okay. One of the things about this building, and we'll get to that question, is at least with this building, with the brick and the mortar and the steel base and the roofing, at least this building, and this reminds me a lot of some of the renovations we did at my previous district, the buildings look like this. You would be amazed what new ceiling tile, new lights, new windows will do for a facility, even this year. We took a 1960, and I'm losing my voice because I'm probably talking too much, but we took a 1960s high school, and I had folks walk into it, and they were floored. They couldn't believe the transformation, and that's what could happen with both this facility and the high school facility. So, question?
When you did go through it, and I talked to you a little bit about this cost, so maybe we can share with everyone. When you did go through and look at ventilation or things like that, were there any red flags that popped up, things that might cause health problems, if not addressed? And what would be the impact on air quality with the renovations?
So the day that I walked this building was actually in the fall, and it was was pretty chilly outside, and it was at least 80 degrees upstairs. I had a long conversation with one of the teachers about the fact that the windows either didn't open, or if they did open, there weren't any screens, and they had bugs and bees and things coming in. So obviously the learning environment, at that temperature, sitting through a long school day is going to be quite a challenge for the students here. So I think the new mechanical system will address a lot of that. As I mentioned before, the codes have changed a lot. So those new systems bring in a lot more outside air, which helps the air quality. It keeps the CO2 down so that the air is a better quality. Obviously, the air conditioning is something that we talked a lot about with the board, about the pros and cons of the cost of air conditioning versus the benefit. And really with the one-to-one initiative and all the new computers coming in and the heat that those generate, we thought that was the right decision to make for the district. So I think another thing I didn't mention before is temperature controls. We'd be looking at putting all new temperature control systems in all the buildings where you can actually go in and program when you want the heat to turn on and off, what temperatures. If there's a problem, you can see it. You can have it send you email alerts and things like that so that you can address it right away if there is a problem. So I think really the mechanical and electrical systems will be pretty much state-of-the-art when we're done. So.
Good question.
If anybody has a question, Colin will be taking care of the microphone. That is not for this room. That's for the videotaping. So that way your question can be heard when we videotape it. So when you put your hand up, wait for Colin and he'll bring the microphone right to you.
I'm willing to do a voiceover later.
Are there other questions about the walkthrough? Okay. Very good. Any questions about the overall bond project? Any questions that you have? Again, I would, educate yourself. You can go to the website and get information. We got a question here?
I do.
Very good.
Provided that the bond passes, is there a tentative schedule of when things would begin, and is there a priority list of what would come first? Would it be transportation? Would it be demolition? What would the plan be?
That is a great question. One of the processes, and I'm going to let Paul address this, is Plant Moran Cressa acts as an owner's rep. They act like the Board of Education, so they plan out the entire scope, the timeline, and everything. And I'll let Paul speak to the way. But it is kind of tricky because we have new wings, additions. We have buildings that we'll need work on over the summer. So that's a great question. Paul?
Yeah, so a few different things. One is the bond proposal is kind of set up to go into two different series. So the first series of bonds would be $50 million. So we would do that work first, and then the second series would be sold 2 or 3 years later, which is about $20 million. So we tried to look at what some of the immediate needs are versus some things that could maybe wait a little bit longer. For instance, you might have a roof that's still got a couple of years of life left in it. We don't want to replace that in year one. We want to get those extra 2 or 3 years of life out of that roof before we replace it. So certainly the elementary schools are at the top of the list to get that done with Smith Road and the new elementary school. Those would be two of the first things we did. Same thing with the middle school renovations. So most of the middle school renovations would be in that first series, as well as the high school renovations. When you start getting into some of the building additions, like the additions at the high school, whether it's the kitchen or the new athletic entrance or the auditorium renovations, those things would tend to be in the second series of bonds. So it is all spelled out in the bond application if you wanted to get in and look and see exactly what's going to happen this year, what's going to happen next year. Someone else asked me, how are you going to do all these renovations with kids in the building? And the easy answer to that is over the summer. So it seems like it would be impossible to do $11 million worth of renovation work in one summer, but it's not. It's a challenge for sure. You have to have things bid out at the right time. You have to have materials ordered and sitting here waiting. You got to be ready to go with all the contracts and all the legalese, but it is possible to do. Now, whether we did this over one summer or 2 summers is something that we talk about with the architects. We talk about with the construction management company. Sometimes we'll ask them to bid it out both ways so we can see if there's a cost savings to do it all one summer versus over 2 years. And obviously there's different bidding advantages. Depends on the contractors that are local and what kind of capacity they have, what kind of manpower they have. So there's a lot of things that go into it. But we'd certainly be looking to do the first series over the first probably 2 years, and then the second series over the last 2 years.
So would the improvements begin then
They
next
would not
school year,
begin,
or
so
the
when
following
the bond passes in May, we basically would take the rest of 2014 to start design work and planning. We got to hire architects, we got to hire engineers and people, so we got to put RFPs out on the street for them to bid on. And once we get them engaged, they've got a lot of design work to do. So we would start construction in the summer of 2015 would be the plan.
And the interesting thing, and that's why I think this is a great question, I didn't know this till I lived it. It takes a couple of months just to sell the bonds and go through that process. There are companies that have to be involved, and they set up buyers. So there is a process even when we passed the bond, for example, in my previous district, everyone said, let's build, let's go. Well, you have to back up. The other piece, and the reason why I'm very pleased with the work that Plant did, I was skeptical that the work that we were doing could be done all in one summer. Well, my house, which by the way is for sale, if anybody wants to buy a house in Montrose, we can't sell it, but anyways, put that plug in there, was right across the street from the school. I mean, I lived right across the street, and I was totally amazed with the work that they were doing both inside, total renovations, total guts on buildings, and doing parking lots at the same time. And it does take a lot of coordination, but the reason for our owner's rep is they coordinate that whole process and ensure that people, and there's weekly meetings, you know, that there's certain things, you know, areas that people have to hit and targets. And so it is quite interesting to go through that process. That's why that's a great question. Very good question. Are there other questions? Cody.
I had a question about this building. Do we have any idea where we think the addition's going to be, or do we have to kind of wait and plan that out later? Or
Great question. The question, if everyone could hear Cody, was the 4-classroom addition, where would that be? And
So I have a few ideas of where it could go. Obviously, as I mentioned out in the hall, we'd be looking to form some committees. So there'd probably be some overall district-wide committees, as I mentioned, and there'd also be a committee at each building. So we'd want to sit down with them and kind of talk through, you know, the traffic patterns, what would work the best. You know, obviously we saw how the portables are bisected by the drive. We'd want to not have that same issue if we put an addition on the building. So we have to talk about how that new loop is going to go around and how everything would kind of tie together. So I have a couple ideas, but until we get an architect on board, I don't think we have it quite figured out yet. And obviously, there's a lot of feedback we need from the users of the space. So,
okay, good question, Cody. Other questions? Okay, we've spent a little over an hour doing the tour, so we're getting a little bit better at it. So I do want to thank you for attending tonight. I would also say that go to our website, look at all of our information. If you're interested in helping, Lisa's right here. Raise your hand, Lisa. She will take your help if you can help, even if it's just, you know, whatever it will be. She'll put you to work. So I do appreciate it. Thank you, Paul. Very nice job. Thank you for your time, and have a good evening.